This session is called Team Coaching as a Force for Change. My name is Geetu Bharwaney, and I'm going to start with handing over to my colleague Khaled, my co-host, to lead us into the session. So Khaled, I turn it over to you.
And of course I'm on mute. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Great to have you all here. We would like to start with a little grounding, making sure all our lives coming together. So we have a great start to our session. And we would like to start with a poem from Mickey Stockby Jones. It's an invitation to brave space. Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. The space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be. But it will be our brave space together. And we will walk on it side by side. We would like to welcome participants today from 6 continents, from Australia, Cyprus, Denmark, Greece. There are a lot of people here, South Africa, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, Tobago, USA, UK, lots of people. This is truly an international group here today. We are really grateful that you're all joining us.
Thank you.
Turning back to Dr. Geetu.
Thank you so much, Khaled, for that beautiful poem and lovely grounding exercise for all of us. So a bit of very quick introduction to the body of work that I will share some perspectives on. So I lead a boutique consulting firm called EI World. We work globally, right across the world. And we do 3 things essentially. We equip coaches in our methodologies. We enable the people dimension of performance in many different contexts. And we deliver our projects across 45 countries of the world. So I'm joined today by Khaled, who you've just heard the voice of, who is a member of the EI World team. We are geographically dispersed team members. So Khaled is based in Saudi, and he is qualified in the team coaching methodologies that we use in EI World. And also my colleague Pamela. Pamela, thank you for being here in support of us. Pamela is on the controls of our session today to support things to run smoothly. And Pamela is from Argentina and is based in the UK with us. So welcome, Pamela, as well. So the team coaching projects that we work on, and this is very much mirrored here in some of the countries that you're all connecting from. It's really exciting to deliver team coaching in these different contexts of the world. And some very quick context for the basis on which I'm speaking from. So I have an EMCC role as one of the global assessment team, where we assess against our coaching standards for organizations to accredit their programs with the EMCC. I'm also a real advocate of evidence-based practice, but also dialogue-based practice. And I love meetings like this, where we come together as peers and we talk about an important topic that can be relevant in the world. As far as team coaching is concerned, I trained in the GTCI program with David Clutterbuck and Peter Hawkins, and I'm also trained in Scrum Mastery. I use a lot of agile work in how we go forward with team coaching. I'm the author of a book called Emotional Resilience, and I provide team emotional intelligence survey accreditation with two important pioneers in the field, Professor Vanessa Druskett and Dr. Stephen Wolf. And I work alongside the EI Consortium to take forward emotional intelligence work in the world. That was a consortium set up by Daniel Goleman and Richard Boyatzis. And apart from my EI World team, which is a UK-based team but geographically dispersed with our coaches, I have two other teams. I have my family team, which is my husband, Mark, and my son, Trayvon. And I also sing in a musical choir, which is preparing for a big New Year's Eve celebration at the moment. So lots of opportunities for teamwork. So in our session today, and thank you for noting in chat where everybody's connecting from, that's wonderful. I'm going to just share some brief input at the start of our dialogue. And then we're going to go into two brief huddles to talk about the pain points that you're seeing in teams, in teams close to where you're based. But also we're going to look at our roles as team coaches or as individual coaches working in the systems of teams. I'll share some top tips and some case studies before we close at the end. So hopefully that sounds like a great use of our 90 minutes together. And I very much hope that everybody will have things that you can take away and build into your practice going forwards. So let's start with what is team coaching. So there are many definitions that you'll see from different thinkers, but I want to share with you what I see as the foundational principles. So when I think about coaching a team, this is what for me comes to mind. And I'll just underscore some of the key points on this slide. It's about coaching a team to deliver valuable outcomes. Sometimes those outcomes are systemic outcomes, sometimes they are planetary level outcomes. And I think in the world that we're living in, it's really important, firstly, to get clear what are the outcomes that a team is trying to produce. And I think that's one of the first questions when you're starting a team engagement. And then there's also, if we can make sure we mute connections, please. There's also about achieving the operational and or strategic objectives, but it's achieving those with the right culture. And this is something that I believe gets left behind, the right culture that enables everybody to deliver at their best. Because when a team is delivering at its best, everybody can bring their best information, their best input, their best ideas, and all of that can be integrated to produce something better than can be produced individually. And that's really what I think about when we're talking about coaching a team. So I think about the storehouse of what's going on in any team. And the way I see it, just like in a warehouse, everything is stacked up, the fears, the tears, the concerns, the sweat, the blood. This is all going on in the background of a team member working in a team because it's all about emotion. But some of this doesn't get processed or discussed in a team. And I think that we play an important role as team coaches to really think about what is that reality. And that's going to be part of the first breakout huddle that we'll be focusing on. So I looked up the definition of storehouse. It's a building for storing goods. And when we think about teams, we know that 75% of teams are dysfunctional. That's what the research shows, that 75% of teams don't actually function as a team. And what tends to happen, and we see this very often at the start of engagements, people are doing their own bits of work and the team only gets together for certain key meetings, but they're non-functional. They're not actually making decisions collectively. And when we start to really think about trust, trust in the team, we really start the journey of helping a team to work together differently so that they can see results. So I have 3 principles that I'd like to share with you that I think really are at the foundation of successful team coaching. And this is something that I've been doing team coaching now for nearly 12 years. And I've been working in coaching for nearly 31 years now. And I think it's important to consider these principles. And these are the 3 principles: that there are many factors to consider, that there are 3 relationship levels to give attention to, in addition to the systemic level, which is talked a lot about in team coaching, and that emotional and social needs matter, and not addressing those needs leads to problems in teams. And by the way, I should have said at the start that later on I'll mention about the slide deck. If you want to receive a copy of the slide deck, you can let us know that in a link so that we can share it back with everybody. So the 3 principles, let me say a bit more about them. So a big credit to Alison Hodge for this fantastic mapping that she did last year and published this year in the Coaching and Mentoring Supervision Handbook, of all that we need to take into account in terms of team coaching. There's a lot there. And Alison gave us permission to share her map with you as part of these sessions with the EMCC. So there's a lot to consider, and we do need to consider that. So that's the first thing about team coaching. The second thing is that there are 3 relationship levels. In addition to the systemic level, there are 3 relationship levels. So there is the intrapersonal, what's going on in people's heads, and that needs to get addressed through coaching. There's the interpersonal, which are people's individual relationships with each other. That is also outside of the team coaching room, because that's about individuals and their relationships with each other. And I think in the early days, we mixed up this level with something that we should do in team coaching. The level that we're dealing with when we're talking about team coaching is what's really going on intra-team, but in the context of the systemic relationships that are apparent across the organization. And we think about the intra-team, so the team dynamics, very much as part of what we need to look at in team coaching. So if you think about this as, fish in a goldfish bowl, in the intrapersonal, we're really just focusing on what's going on for the individual fish. For the team, for the interpersonal, we're looking at the one-to-one relationships. And sometimes in team coaching, we set an assignment where people go away as team members and they work on the individual interactions that they have. But we don't try and bring that baggage into the team coaching. And I think that this is an important distinction. And this is something that I was introduced to by Marie Fair, who is herself a team coach supervisor. And I think it's really useful to think about these different aspects of the team. So when we're talking about team coaching, I believe that we're focusing on the organizational culture and the team culture, which is worked on in team coaching sessions, but it's also worked on while the team does its work. And that's the most important thing to me about team coaching, that we're helping the team get better at its teamwork whilst it is doing its work. And we need a clear framework for that. And I'll share with you a bit later the framework that we use. A third key principle is about emotional and social needs, because there's been a big body of work by Susan Fiske and others to look at what are the needs when people come together. And we know that belonging is the very central need that everybody has when they come into any kind of team interaction, group interaction. People want a sense of belonging. So it's really important in the way that we're delivering team coaching that we're actually meeting these needs all of the time that we are delivering team coaching. So a need for belonging, Nobody wants to be kicked out in a team. Nobody wants to be unwelcome in a team. Shared understanding is about having shared understanding of the team's context, because nobody can have the same understanding of the team until you put all the pieces together. So that shared understanding is really important. And finally, control. People want autonomy and they want control over the information, over the resources, over what's discussed. So actually sharing that control and giving the voice to all of the team members is really important. So those would be sort of 3 key principles. And the framework that we use in our practice and the framework that we equip practitioners in is a framework that is based on research showing the difference between average teams and outstanding teams. So if you want an average team, what you do is you build the fundamentals. So the fundamentals are clear goals, meetings that are effective, and clear roles in the team. And that's what most people do when they do team building, team development. They get really clear on the vision, the strategy for the team. They get clear on how the team wants to interact together, and they get clear on the roles and responsibilities of the team. But that's very much, the individual roles. But what we know from research is that if you want a team that's going to have psychological safety, and if you want a team that's going to have a strong team identity where everybody feels that they belong in the team and they have a shared, reason for being there, and they have a shared feeling of being, with their team, and the team has constructive dialogue. These are outcomes, they're not inputs. So we can't say to a team, let's build trust, because trust is an outcome. It's an outcome if we do certain other things. So, for example, under the 9 norms that you see mapped out here, these are research norms for how you actually build a team that is high functioning. And 3 of these 9 norms correlate the most with outstanding performance. So that's part of the framework that we use, and that's really the perspective that I'm speaking from. So with that said about culture, what we want to do now is we want to go into our first of 2 huddles about the organizational pains that we are each seeing around the world today. And the great thing about the GPS series is that this is having relevant conversations with us as coaches from different parts of the world, to actually share perspectives. Whatever type of team coaching you're doing today, maybe you are not yet a team coach, maybe you're an individual coach and you're hearing about what's going on in the organization through one-to-one work. Everybody is welcome into this conversation, no matter your level of experience in team coaching. So I mentioned earlier the storehouse where everything gets stacked up in each person's, emotional experience. It could be, what they're struggling with. It could be their concerns. It could be the sweat that they're giving to support the organization or the team that they're part of. So in some ways it's struggle and strife for team members. There can be tears as well in the background. But the question I have for all of you, which we're going to put in chat now, we're going to go into a quick huddle. So this is only 10 minutes. And we want to invite you in that 10-minute of huddle to actually share together your answers to this question. What are the organizational pains that you see in the storehouse of any teams that you are close to? And what we want to encourage you to do, because when we go into breakouts, your chat will just be with your individual group. If you could keep a note of your pains separately, like in a Word document, so you can copy back to the main session and share with everybody, when you come back. So have a huddle with 4 or 5 of you, and then when you come back to the main session, if you could copy the panes into the chat, everyone, when you come back, that would be fantastic. So if I can just stop sharing there, and just if you can give me welcome to those who've joined since we got started, and lovely to see familiar faces. We do want to invite you to put your camera on, because a discussion with a camera on is a much better discussion normally. But I know that some of you in very late time zones, so we give you grace if you need to be off camera for any reason. But we're now going to switch you into breakouts for 10 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll invite you to put into the chat, everyone, your thoughts on pains, so we can see what the shared experience is from around the world. So Pamela, if we're ready, can I have a thumbs up if everybody's ready to move into a quick conversation with colleagues from around the world. All right, thank you very much. So we'll move into breakouts now, and we'll come back in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for having that conversation together, and welcome to those who joined during the breakout team. So Khaled, over to you. We want to invite you to use the chat, everyone, to copy across. If we could invite you to do that now, and we'll be sharing the chat back with everybody as well, so you have this.
Okay, the first comments are coming in. Fantastic. Ooh, there must be some real intense discussions coming in. Okay, so we would like that you unmute yourself and actually contribute in real life. How about Jane Lives? What came up with you in your group?
Right. Well, we were a group of 4, and we I shared with there wasn't a lot of experience of team coaching within the group, so I was able to share a current challenge that I have, where I'm working with 4 disparate, I'm saying disparate, not desperate. They might be desperate later on, but at the moment they're just disparate. And they're working in a very sensitive area of looking after young people at risk, and the local authority has got a responsibility. So these 4 individuals have been kind of chucked together, and the organisation itself is in sort of developmental stages, and the pain. We coming back to the question. The pain was the competitiveness among the 4, the feeling of I'm superior, person A feels superior to person B because they have a higher level of qualification, but they don't communicate, and they've kind of taken on the role of being the policeman of the group. Person B has bags of leadership, but feels undermined because his colleagues go behind his back to talk to the big boss, etc., etc. And these are the kind of things that are creating stresses and strains, and I'd say pain and sweat, where we are now. So we're using some some self-assessment. So for example, there's we're doing an organizational SWOT, how each of them see the their role in the organization, etc., etc. So at least we're going to try to achieve a shared understanding first. That's the first thing before we start building.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much for that insight. Antonio, what came up in your group as pain points in the storehouse?
Well, it was mainly building up stress and relational problems within the teams, which come up with poor relationship, which reflects on everything, not only on their state of mind, but also in their performance, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. In the chat box, Sarah Klethil made some interesting points. Sarah, would you please unmute yourself and elaborate maybe a little bit?
We ended up talking quite a lot about the pandemic and the effect of that pandemic currently. Mm-hmm. So we talked about, some of the things that have happened are that processes have been used over people, which has sort of eroded team trust. People are generally feeling quite exhausted and demotivated. Quite a lot of managers have gone to a directive style during this pandemic. And also that, communications have significantly changed, the systems for our communications. So it's been very difficult for people to really engage in that process and actually learn all the new ways of having to communicate. I just shared that having now experience going back with people in real life, how much energy suddenly has been generated from that opportunity for people to interact for the first time together in larger groups. So lots of stuff really about kind of the pandemic was where we ended up mostly talking. Okay, anybody else like to share anything from that group?
Please unmute yourself and contribute. Nope. Okay, then I would like to call on Elham. You have their frustration with ambiguity or politically motivated objectives. Could you elaborate on that point?
Actually, I'll ask Abigail to elaborate on it because it was based on her experience working in a government organization. So I was just a note.
Okay. Fine.
Abigail?
Hi, sorry, I can't have my camera on because my internet is not stable. So if I do, I then start breaking up. So I was just saying, when working with government, you realize some team members are there not so much to contribute towards the achievement of what the team is trying to aim, but they're politically placed in the team. So their interest is to actually protect the interest of their party or whatever the case may be. So they are not focusing on what we're trying to achieve as a team in terms of the objectives of the team. And this we experienced as we were working with different ministries in government when we're trying to implement the World Bank sponsored objectives of trying to improve the policies and procedures in government. So how we can, in the ease of doing business in the country and how we relate with other countries in terms of if somebody wants to come in and invest in our country, how can we make sure that the registration is simpler and faster? But you realize some individuals are just there to create problems and havoc and to bring the interests of their parties as opposed to actually trying to get the system to actually improve. So that's where we had then frustrations of people thinking now we're making progress towards this way, but then once maybe the person then gives back feedback to their principals, obviously the team is then derailed to say, no, you can't do that, stop that, and it's not making sense. So yeah, you then get those frustrations from politically motivated individuals.
Thank you very much for that elaboration. Who again? Nigel, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I realized when our group spoke, we really went into some of the micros of the fact that you get the gossiping, you get someone doesn't want to give feedback, someone you don't want to maybe challenge because they feel are indispensable, the manager isn't really playing a key role. So we're in the individual, each of the individuals doing space. But I've spoken now, I'm speaking after about 5 people have spoken, so and many things have already been repeated. But I think the reminder was for us is leadership. it really comes back to, if the team isn't being led well, then you obviously have all the little things we were listing. I'll stop there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. How are you doing with time, Geetu?
So 1 minute or so on this, and then we'll...
Okay, so we have the chance to have somebody else jumping in. Eileen Duncan, what is on your mind after having the discussion?
Maureen captured it very well, and it's in chat, but what's on my mind is fatigue for the team leaders that I coach, extreme fatigue, needing a break, can't see the future, lack of innovation, and lack of inspiration, motivation. And that then is obviously going to pass into their teams. And some of the team leaders that I'm coaching are still in lockdown in other countries, are not out yet. And their circumstances are pretty dire in some places. So it's a lot of frustration of going, where to from here. And so I can see there's not so much strife, it's more worries and tiredness, maybe coming to tears, if we put it that way. Yeah. But Maureen captured all the points. Thank you.
Okay. With this, I'm giving back to Geetu to continue with our session.
All right. Thank you so much, Khaled, and thanks everybody for that that really wonderful input. And what struck me in some of the behaviours that you described is that some of this is kind of instinctive behaviour to withdraw from other people and not be a productive team member. And I think that the times we're living are very I think they're challenging times for teams everywhere, however people are living this post-pandemic or still in the pandemic context. But I think it really calls into question what role can we play as the catalysts for change, or as individuals that help hold the space for teams. So I want to move on to this whole question about roles. So given all that you have read in chat and given what you discussed in your teams, I want to move on to our role as change agents. And by change agent, I mean whether we're an individual coach working with the system of a team and hearing about it, or whether we're actually an experienced team coach or a new team coach. This is the question that I really sort of have, that there are roles that people play in teams, compared to one-to-one. So it's, coaching the group is going to be very different to coaching an individual. And I know that earlier, I think it was Jane that mentioned about doing individual assessments. What we found is that individual assessments, they're good for building self-awareness, but they're not always that productive for actually creating culture in a team. So to create culture, we really need to have the team in the conversation about the way that the team functions. But I want to actually invite you to think about the roles that we play and can play. And we've got coming into chat the second brief huddle that we're going to invite you to put your voice into. So given all that context, what roles do we need to be able to play as team coaches, given all that's been said? And what else needs to be taken into consideration as team coaches? So again, if we could invite you to capture your thoughts, either as a team or individually, whatever way you want to do it, and then to copy that into the chat, everyone here, so that we can then share that back with everybody in follow-up. That would be super helpful. So that's the question. And if we could invite you now, hopefully on this second round, we've got everybody in groups of 3, 4, or 5. So we want to invite you to have that brief huddle, and then we'll come back on the hour. And on the hour, we'll hear some of that, but we'll also then move into the final part of the session today, where I'll share some case studies and some ways to go forward with team coaching in terms of building your practice. So over to all of you now for a brief 10-minute huddle. Welcome back, everybody. We'd love to invite you to copy into the chat your thoughts on roles and any other considerations that are on your mind for team coaching to be effective.
Okay, let's start with Vicky. Vicky, would you like to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit what came up in your group?
Yeah, we had a really good discussion, actually. It felt very rich for such a short amount of time. We talked about the use of self-assessment tools to get that sense of shared understanding in the group. We talked about our role of holding the space, whether that's just informally during general conversations or whether that's more formally and kind of protecting time in team agendas for particular activities. We talked a lot about the role of the coach in terms of being really trusted within the group and how important that was, but also how, depending on your position in the group, that can bring its own challenges. So you might be a member of the team with existing kind of role, which might create a conflicting agenda, or you might be completely unknown to the team because you're a remote coach that's been brought in with a particular kind of task to do. So we talked about that. We talked about our role as coaches in holding up a mirror and sort of a sense of revealing to the group the existence of those pains and what they are. And then we talked about the sort of importance of a safe stroke brave space, which I'm now calling it a brave space, to work things through. So that psychological safety being really important. And just the sort of final thought there on what you've been asked to do as a team coach. So what permission you've already been given versus what you might want to sell into the group as their opportunities where you could perhaps add additional value as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. V.S. Kumar, would you like to let us know what came up as roles from your side and your group?
The responsibility that we carry as a team coach is very, very big, which can turn around to the organization and to the team performance and the result. So what the team sometimes is not able to see the cultural difference, the individual strength between intra-departments, the common objective, why this task has to be executed, or why this a thing has to be carried out in a particular time frame. So how we can bring in that harmony together while we provide the space to them, allowing them to take the brave decisions, actions by listening to their fears and their own emotions, etc. What is the need of the hour? How systematically their work is going to make an impact for the common benefit of all. It is not an individual, as a team, how we are going to make an impact. Right? With all this, we are doing it without any attachment, without saying that what we are saying you have to execute. We are just facilitating themselves to see their strength. What if they can move forward?
Thank you very much for your insights. Yeah. Okay. Julia Bent, what came up in your group?
Hi. Well, we had a conversation about really, to be honest with you, what has already been said. But just to reiterate, we talked about the importance of creating a safe space to encourage understanding, encourage confidentiality, people that can speak their minds, and also for us to be able to really understand what the team dynamics are. So we have to sort of sit back in some ways. We have to assume a sort of pseudo leadership role, because you need to sort of still be there as a guidance to make sure that we are still trying to bring harmony to the team and understand the different dynamics within the team in order to deliver the objective as to what it is that I've been brought in as a coach to do, let alone what they need to deliver as the team themselves, and to kind of appreciate each other as well. We also have to be a bit of a team player, we felt, in order to connect with the team as well, to encourage trust and commonality and, and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. I hear you mentioning a lot of things which are sort of connected to and growing out of contracting. Did I hear this correctly, or do you have a different drift there?
I didn't see it as coming in and out of contracting. However, you do need to ensure that you do consider the contracting each time that you actually, to make sure that you are on track with their understanding, what they make sure that they understand what we are here to achieve, as well as what I'm understanding, what I need to achieve for them and for the team. So I wouldn't have put it as contracting, but you're right, it is contracting, reaffirming the contract.
Yeah, I see a lot of head noddings. Julia, what are you thinking when you're nodding your head just now? What was I thinking? Oh, sorry, not different Julia. My apologies. Julie Murphy.
Hi, everybody. I think that contracting is the secret to everything. That everybody is clear, that I'm clear, that everybody has an input to the contract. And that gives people clarity of purpose. And it brings everybody together. And when things seem to be going off, when things are not going in the right direction, or I feel that things are not going in the right direction, that I stop and I share my feelings, and maybe we need to recontract. Because when you put a team together and the dynamic of everybody speaking and sharing their thoughts, it changes the directions and people have other ideas. So I think recontracting is very, very important, and it will happen many times, I'm sure, during team sessions.
Thank you very much. Being considerate of time, I'm passing back to Geetu to continue with our program.
Okay, thanks, Khaled. Thank you so much for drawing out. That's an amazing collection. That sounds like there were a lot of very rich conversations across the groups, and thank you for that. As I said at the start, we'll share all of that back, because this is all about peer sharing and joining together and supporting our practice and awareness together of how to do team coaching, how to be effective in team coaching. And something that's really struck me when I look at that long list, I feel overwhelmed with the amount of different roles, the different things that we might collectively believe we're being asked to be for our clients. And I think that given the context that we're in today, there's a lot of message in the coaching sector that team coaching is really the thing. It's the thing that's going to help transform the way that organizations work. So I sense this bigger calling for all of us about really wrapping our own heads around what this is. So in this last few sort of minutes that we have in our session, and I want to make sure we have a good 5 minutes at the end for just kind of open, discussion for anyone that wants to stay on. I want to share some top tips about developing a team coaching practice, assuming that this will at some point, whether it's right now or it's in the future for you, something that we want to be evolving into. So a few tips. So firstly, I want to share how we think in EI World about the delivery of team coaching. And we think about it in 4 very clear steps. So the first is what's the business or organizational imperative. So that's not only the pains, but it's the objectives. Why is it important for this team in front of you to work well together? Because when we ground what we're doing in that imperative, it's going to be much more effective for not only the team, but the stakeholders of the team, which starts to affect the system that the team operates in. Then we want to make sure that we've engaged the team leader fully, because any team coaching without the team leader fully engaged is not going to be successful. So even if the project was commissioned somewhere else by, say, an HR professional or a strategic lead on a particular topic, saying this team is really crucial, we have to engage the team leader. And I find that it's really important to think about that as a coaching session where you're inquiring with the team leader about the pains, about the challenges, about what's happening around the team. And if the team leader starts talking about individuals, try to bring the conversation back to the team, because it's at the team level that we really want to operate. The next thing that we do is we use a survey, and we use the Team Emotional Intelligence Survey. I've used about 15 different team tools over the years, but I found that this particular one always gets at the heart of what's going on in the team and why and where the team is struggling, so that the team can have a discussion about that at the team level, not at the individual level. And then the final thing is that we then focus on the team coaching intervention, developing the whole team as a team at that intra-team level. So some suggestions and some guiding principles is that what we try to do is to make it really practical. So it's not off-site, it's not, fancy, long retreats. It's really about the actionable work of the team. And it's also then about using research on teams as part of the evidence base, so that the journey that we're taking teams on is highly reliable and will generate results. Because I found in the early days that I was a little bit, in the dark. I'd have favorite models that I was using, but they didn't always create the sustainable changes. So some top tips that I would offer, having made the shift myself as a one-to-one executive coach 12 years ago, that this notion that just because we're really good at one-to-one coaching, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be outstanding in team coaching, because it is quite a big shift. It's a different way of thinking. So an example of that is you're in a team, you see one person, either not tuning in to other team members, etc. In the past, I used to think about, what's going on for that person? Because that's kind of my executive coaching hat, thinking about the world through the individual's experience. But actually, the question to ask is, what is going on in the team that is motivating that behavior in the individual? It's a completely different place to look, and it's a completely different way to work with a team. I also think that supervision is absolutely critically important when we're working in teams, because of the context and the roles that we have, come up with today, and more, because it's going to be different for every team. There will be similar themes, that having somebody alongside us as a supervisor that can look at the team and really think about what's really going on. And I found that working with a team coach supervisor has really accelerated my ability to work on team coaching. And I love the 7 Eyes model. It's a very it's a well-known supervision model, but I think the 7 Eyes are really powerful for team coaching supervision. And if you don't yet work with a supervisor, I strongly recommend it. And I found this 7 Eyes model just really fantastic. So a couple of other tips, I believe that there's a real continuous learning, and topics like group dynamics, group development, the role of emotion in teams. I don't think that as in team coaching, we ever arrive at feeling experienced, because there is a constantly evolving body of knowledge around this. For example, now with remote teams, what we know about remote teams and the importance of, the emotional context for working remotely. I also think that the tools that we choose are very important, because tools are all about having the conversation, but I believe that we need tools that are well researched, and that where we have this difference between average and outstanding teams, that is cross-culturally validated, because this, increasingly, even if we're working in a single country, we're going to have diversity of perspective, and it's important that the tools that we use are actually applicable right across the world, and not just kind of like used in a Western Anglo-Saxon context. So the model that we use ourselves is called the Team Emotional Intelligence Survey, and that's the model that we equip practitioners in ourselves. And I wanted to finally share with you just a few different examples of the sorts of things that we have seen occur. And I've just picked, I think, 4 different brief examples to share with you. So these come from EI World, which we're now in year 22 of our organization, and that's the kind of source of these a few brief case studies. So we've delivered team coaching in multiple contexts, including ones where people said, they're not soft contexts, so you need to kind of like really know what you're doing with team coaching. So we've worked a lot with virtual teams, but we've also worked in sports, and we've worked in railway businesses, we've worked in agile teams, and we've come in, in all different military contexts, in higher education, as well as in the energy sector and financial services, and also in a number of emergency services. So I want to share one of my favorite experiences of working with a team. So basically, when we did interviews at the start of a particular engagement, a number of people in the team, including the team leader, expressed that the team was in a breakdown context, because they were very successful in the past, but they started to not be so successful. Morale was at an all-time low. This was quite a big product development team. And what the intervention was that we helped create a new subset of that wider team who would tackle this problem. So we didn't work with the 27 people that were in the product development department. We actually worked with a subset of 12 individuals that were the ones that, in a way, had both the energy and the technical expertise to solve this problem of developing a new product that had a very long lead time in the oil and gas sector. So the intervention was simply forming that team, doing a launch with that team, and then we supported the team with awareness of team effectiveness, with building resilience of the team, and also helping the team actually work on this topic of the new product development. And the outcome that was achieved in a 6-month project was that they took the time to build a new prototype from 7 years in the past to 4 months. And that became their model of best practice for product development. And this particular project was in the US, but it was a team of very diverse individuals that were working together in that team. So I offer you that just as one of a few examples. There's another example of a team that we worked with, which was headquartered out of Argentina, but they were working right across South America, right across all the different countries of South America. And that region, in a global context of a significant change that was going on in that global business, was that that region was always considered to be the kind of underdog, the region that people wouldn't normally pay attention to. And basically what we did there, the intervention again, just looked slightly differently. We did a kickoff meeting with a team. We did one-to-one interviews, that was 30-minute interviews. We used the team emotion intelligence survey. We did one team dialogue session. It was over 2 days and it was in person. And then we repeated the survey. So there was no intervention beyond the 2 days, but there were 2 surveys to actually show what was the change in the team. And basically this team outperformed against all the odds, and it was, you know, held up as a good case study of what's achievable in a very short space of time. And I think what was very important there is that the engagement of the team leader, so the regional general manager who commissioned this work, was absolutely the person that wanted, you know, this team to be successful. And with this reorganization globally, he actually had a new team, but it wasn't a team that he had chosen. It was a team that was kind of given to him in that instance. So that was, you know, very interesting context. And then a couple of other final examples. So this was an executive team where the group CEO was the person that commissioned this. And it was a team that was part US, part UK, but there was a lot of tension in this team, a lot of underperformance against their potential. And the outcome that occurred 3 months into the start of this was that they started to discuss and then made happen the largest merger in their particular sector. And the intervention itself was one-to-one engagement with each of the individuals so that we could be sure that everybody was fully committed and bought in to why this was important. We used the team emotion intelligence survey to have a conversation about what everybody was thinking about the team. And then we did a team effectiveness offsite, which was a 2.5-day meeting, but the team effectiveness part of it was 1 day of that 2.5-day intervention. And then each team leader had one-to-one executive coaching. And there was no repeat survey in that instance, but there was a very, very substantive impact. And in all of these examples, there were naturally past experiences where people had failed team development. If I had, £1 million for every time I hear about a failed team development intervention, I would be very, very wealthy. Now, this senior leadership team, this is an example from the Middle East and North Africa region. This is a listed company where we were asked to do a pilot of one-to-one coaching on the path of then working with the whole team. And the team intervention was basically 2 offsites and 2 surveys, but we added to that culture listening. So there were 2 groups in this team. There was a legacy team and there were new joiners to the team. So we did a culture listening exercise where we had the legacy team actually share what's the culture that is important to the context of how this team goes forward. And there was also very brief executive coaching. And this team we worked with in the run-up to the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020. And this company has had outstanding results right through COVID. They've been an outstanding example of both business results, but also having the right culture in place. And I always look for improvement within the first 3 months. If it's a 6-month intervention, we're always looking for, at least kind of like some impact, very like early and quick wins. And that's what really excites me about this work. So a couple of things that I would recommend, as next steps. I would highly recommend that you benchmark yourself as a team coach against the EMCC team coaching standards. So I have them here on a slide, but we also have a link that we can pop into chat. for you to be able to go back to the team coaching standards so that you can see how you yourself as an individual team coach stack up, and you know, to bring this into the context of what you do as a team coach. I'm really up for connecting on LinkedIn with anybody that wants to stay connected on this topic, to compare notes and to you know, continue the dialogue. A number of you have let us know in chat. We also have a link. It's easier for us if you actually fill out that link, because it gives us permission from a GDPR standpoint. I know that a number of the countries represented here have you know, come under GDPR as we do. And also, if you're interested in finding out more about team emotional intelligence, then we have a link to that as well. So that brings us to the very end, and what I would like to say is a very warm thank you to all of you for joining us, and Khaled, a very big shout out to you as well for supporting and helping to facilitate those outputs from the fantastic breakout conversations. And Pamela, thank you so much for the technical support, and also for living through with us the sweat of the breakout teams. And thank you all again for joining us and for patience. And we're going to stay online for about, you know, a further sort of 10 minutes or so for anybody that wants to chat and to have, you know, general conversation at the end of the session. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and all the best for all of the endeavours in team coaching and beyond.